Hi, it's Laura from Read18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. This is a VR to Tarot Temptations by Beneficial Tarot. I'll link the original video in the description box below, and I'll also timestamp my answers because even though there are only 7 questions, you'll know I'll find a way to ramble on for a while. This is a tag about what kinds of decks we are interested in and why, different kind of commonalities across the decks that we find ourselves most attracted to. And so it's been a fun one to see all the VRs and get a sense of people's kind of styles. And so that's why I wanted to make a VR, and here I am very late doing so. Question number 1. What type of tarot system draws you in? Smith-Waite, Thoth, Tarot de Marseille, etc. I would say that Smith-Waite and Marseille, or Pip decks, draw me in equally. I've spent quite a bit of time studying both. I have zero interest or intention of ever exploring Thoth, but I like Smith-Waite and Marseille decks, and I really like, I will say, so that I can show an example of something. Where did it go? There we go. I really like what I would call the system of fancy pips. So this is the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. And this deck has minors that are not quite Smith-Waite illustrated, but they're also not quite plain pips. Hence, fancy pips. I'm very drawn to fancy pips. So, that is the system that draws me in. Fancy pips. Number 2. What theme are you drawn to in decks? For example, Earth decks, Fae decks, medieval decks, etc. are the examples provided in the question. I have no attraction to Fae decks or medieval decks personally, but Earth decks, very much so, which should not be a surprise as a druid. I like any kind of nature-based deck, including animal decks. I have a bit of a harder time with animal tarot decks than oracle because if the tarot card animal pairing doesn't align in the way that I think of the animal, then it can be a bit distracting. But anything related to nature or landscapes or animals or plants, I like. I would put some of my favorite decks in this category, like the Tarot of the North Atlantic. This deck is embroidered, which is really cool. It is fancy pips, in my opinion. And it is, of course, a nature theme. And as a Pisces, a water, ocean theme is particularly attractive to me. Really like that. I also really like the Tarot of the Pacific Northwest. Is it? No, it's Pacific Northwest Tarot. The Pacific Northwest Tarot. I really like this deck because I think that the animal pairings with the tarot cards are done really well. There are some cards in this deck that are plants as well, but I would say that it's mostly animals. And I think that the creator did a really good job explaining why the choices were made to put which animal on which card, or which plant on which card. So I really like that as a nature deck. I also really like decks that I, in other videos, have called place-based decks. And so an example of that would be something like the Tarot of Architectural Objects by Tina, who's Queen of Wands on the internet, who also created the Naturescapes Tarot as well, which I would call a place-based and nature deck. Another deck that would be a place-based deck would be something like Guidebook Tarot, which I also love. Decks that are really atmospheric because they, focus on place in one way or another is a theme that I really like as well. Question number 3. What do you like cosmetically about a deck? Cardstock, size, box, guidebook, etc. Mostly a guidebook for me is not a cosmetic question, but there are cosmetic aspects to it, so I get it. In terms of cardstock, I actually am pretty flexible when it comes to cardstock. I do quite like Linen cardstock. This is Landback Tarot and Oracle of Colonization. This is a really nice linen textural cardstock, and it's large and it shuffles really well. So I like linen cardstock. I do also like smooth or matte cardstock. When I made my deck, which is the an arboreal own, I thought about linen because I really like linen cardstock, but with the photos and photographic art specifically, I think that I actually prefer the smooth. This is just the superior smooth from Make Playing Cards. I like that well enough. I like the whatever this is, the Pacific Northwest Tarot. It's not rose petal, but it's very matte. It doesn't stick. It shuffles really well. I do like matte gilding. If a deck is going to be gilded, I don't need a deck to be gilded. I do prefer it to be matte instead of the shiny. In most cases, some decks really suit the shiny metallic, but I tend to prefer the matte, but it's not kind of a deal breaker or something that I absolutely have to have. Really any cardstock that isn't really, really flimsy and thin and isn't sticky, glossy like the Gorgon's Tarot. I don't like that. As long as it's not that, then I'm actually pretty happy. I even have a deck that is the glossy cardstock from Make Playing Cards. This is the Stars of Umber Tarot, and it is glossy. There's my ring light. But this actually shuffles really well. This is not sticky like the Schiffer sticky cardstock at all, even though it is glossy. So glossy can even be a cardstock that I like. I'm not overly picky about cardstock, though if something feels so thin that I'm worried that I'm going to rip it, like my Jonathan D. Tarot pack, which is the first deck I ever owned, I really, really don't like overly thin cardstock. Now, in terms of the box, that's the second part of the cosmetics question. In terms of the box, I really like a box that is roughly the same size as the deck. Like something like this box that the Pacific Northwest Tarot came in. It has the magnetic wraparound style. The box holds the guidebook and also holds the deck and not much else. And I like that because it's easy to fit on a shelf. It's sturdy. You don't need to buy a bag to keep it in really. It is not going to take up too much space. And also it's not a bunch of pointless material. I really don't like a bunch of plastic. I don't want a great big box with a plastic thing with the hole in it with the cards in the middle. It just feels profoundly wasteful to me. I don't want a whole bunch of cellophane. I really like when creators do take account of the environment in their packaging decisions. The Transient Light Tarot by Ari Weisner has plastic free and is also completely recyclable, which is great. I know that for the Landback Tarot by Auntie Kay's Tarot, that this box, which is a very plain brown cardboard box with printing on it, this is definitely, you know, environmental considerations in action as well, which I really like to see. I like when the guidebook fits in the box, which means a small guidebook in most cases, as long as the font is legible, which this one is. A guidebook to me that has size 2 font in it is not useful. I would say that it's ableist, actually. And so if a guidebook is going to be something that fits inside the box, it needs to have a good font like this one does, or a bigger guidebook so that it's readable. I don't need a color guidebook. I don't care about a color guidebook. I feel like it's just really expensive to do it that way. I'm happy with grayscale. I don't need big full color glossy photos in a guidebook. Like if I have the deck of cards, I can look at the image there. So from that, you know, that's the way that I can cosmetically think of a guidebook. I like it to be readable, functional, and, you know, that's about it. So I also like one of the questions for the cosmetics component. I like decks with weird shapes. I really like La Courte des Cherokee's long, thin shape, or even the Borderless Deviant Moon is a little bit long and narrow. I really like that kind of shape. I like the weird oval Luminous Void Tarot shape. I like a round deck. I love the Journey Oracle, which is hexagonal. I am drawn to a weird shape. I would like to find more square decks that I like. I only have the Augenblick Tarot and none of the others, but I really like a square deck as well. Size-wise, I have decks that are, mini deck in a tin, and I have decks that are the size of, Margaret Peterson or Next World Tarot. So I'm all over the place in terms of size, but I do like a weird shape. Question number 4. What type of deck do you prefer? Tarot, Oracle, Lenormand, Kipper, any other? I like Tarot. I like Oracle. I have a very small collection of Lenormand decks. I'm not super proficient in Lenormand, but I find it interesting and enjoyable to use. But I have very, very few Lenormand decks. I have a very small collection of playing card decks for divination, not counting the ones that we play cribbage with. I have some playing cards that are set aside for reading purposes. And of course, since I made one, I do love an Ogham deck, though admittedly when I'm reading Ogham, I actually prefer to read the staves over a deck. But it was a bit weird because I made an Ogham deck, but I like all of those systems. And of the ones listed in the question, Kipper I've never worked with. I know that it's a kind of cartomancy system, but I have no familiarity with Kipper whatsoever. I've just never used one. I'm sure that I would love it if I had one, but I've never owned a Kipper deck. Question number 5. Do you like decks that have a story to them, a story attached to the cards, or the process of how the deck was made? This is an interesting question that I had to think about a little bit. I do like when a creator explains their thought process in a guidebook. The last thing I want in a guidebook is just generic keywords that has nothing to do with the specific deck. I do want to know the backstory of the creation of the artwork, or why the creator decided to create the artwork or make the deck out of the artwork, right? I'm interested in that. I also thought about decks with a story to them in the sense of panoramic minors. So one deck that I really love that does this is the Architect's Tarot by Yusuf Bushiri, which is one of my favorite decks. And I'm going to try to hold it so you can see here that the 4 and 5 of Cups, you can see that they line up there. Now I'm going to be holding them crooked, but if you put them beside each other, you can see that the paths connect, even though there is also a border. And so I can think of this as kind of a story, because if you lay them all out, you could think about the trajectory from the ace, up through the majors and the courts, which is kind of a story in the cards. I think that there's a bigger guidebook in the works for this deck, but I know that there are some story components in this deck in terms of particular real buildings being represented in the Architect's Tarot. Like one of the cards that I want to say is the Strength card depicts the tallest building ever designed by a female architect, for example. And so I like those little, nods to story, right? And I have also ordered, I don't have it yet because it has a huge delay from the Kickstarter. I have ordered the Literary Tarot. The Literary Tarot features contemporary authors pairing classical works of literature with a tarot card. And frankly, I'm more interested in the contemporary authors than I am the classical stuff, but I love the idea of bringing literature and tarot together. I love the literary witches, oracles, like those kind of things that have stories attached in that very kind of literal way. I really, really like that. I'm hoping to make some sort of series out of the Literary Tarot in some way. I'm not sure what that will look like. Mostly I just really miss Becca and Kelly Bear's Literary Witches book club videos. I loved that. I read almost all of them. So I do like decks that have a story to them for sure. Question number 6. Are you tempted by seasonal decks? For example, Halloween decks, Christmas decks, etc. No. No, I'm not. I don't own any. I have never really had one on my wish list either. I do have some decks that I would say are seasonal in the sense of Tildwick Tarot just feels really autumnal to me because of its palette. It's not really themed that way, though. The saltwater reading cards between the color palette and the ocean theme like feel really beachy and summery to me, so they're seasonal in that sense. But again, they're not seasonally themed really. So I'm not tempted by decks that are like Halloween decks or Christmas decks because I know that I wouldn't use them very much. I would though be into, and this is a idea I've been throwing around for myself as a deck, that I might create, an oracle deck that I might create, have an oracle with cards that are based on different kinds of seasonal phenomena. So have maybe a solstice card and an equinox card and a leaves start to fall in autumn card and a first snow card and a flower buds open for the first time card, like these kind of things. I would love something like that, but I'm really not drawn to decks that are really specifically themed for a particular holiday, for example, because I just feel like I wouldn't use them enough. I mean, there are some that I like the artwork, like I like some of the images in the Halloween Oracle, but I know that I wouldn't use it, so I'm not tempted. Number 7, do you have a favorite artist who creates cards? There are way too many artists whose cards I love, who I would like to buy multiple decks from, who in some cases I've bought other items with their art on it. There are way too many to name a favorite. I love Tina, Queen of Wands decks, Naturescapes, Architectural Objects, and Page of Cats. I love all of them. I love Cedar McLeod, who created the Numinous Tarot and several Oracle decks that I also have. I love Jesse Ujazi, formerly Jesse Jumanji, who created the Afro Tarot 2, and the Flora and Fauna of Africa Oracle deck, which I also have. There's so many. I love so many artists' work. I love Mari in the Sky, who created the Gentle Tarot. I'm excited to have some tapestries coming from her to hang on my wall. We chose 2 animal ones that are based on our the element of our sun signs. So we got a watery and an airy one. I'm very excited about that. I love Kelly Fitzgerald's decks, her Lenormand deck, and her Oracle deck, and her tokens. There are so many. So way too many to pick a favorite, but there are so many artists that I love in the tarot creating community. So thank you to Beneficial Tarot for creating this tag. I'm happy to have finally made a VR. I've been enjoying everybody else's. I will see you all in my next video. Until then, I wish everybody well. See y'all soon.